Commander James Porter stood motionless before the massive viewing window of the Vengeance, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The ancient Galactic Council station floated in the distance, its spiral arms glowing with the same pale blue light that had cast humanity into exile 800,000 years ago. He allowed himself a small smile. They had no idea what was coming. The bridge crew worked in focused silence, their enhanced minds connecting directly with the ship's quantum systems. Humanity had changed during their exile. They were no longer the simple beings the Council had banished. 800 millennia of isolation had forced them to evolve, to adapt, to become something far beyond what their ancestors could have imagined. "Station is within optimal range, Commander," said First Officer Robert Wells, his voice calm and measured. The subtle gleam of neural implants beneath his skin caught the starlight as he moved. Porter nodded, watching as their fleet of 30 ships moved into formation around the Vengeance. Each vessel was a masterpiece of dimensional engineering, capable of slipping between the fabric of space itself. The Council's sensors would be going crazy trying to understand what they were seeing. Their primitive detection systems couldn't even begin to comprehend the technology humans now possessed. "Begin transmission sequence," Porter ordered. He couldn't help but remember the stories passed down through generations, tales of how the Council had framed humanity as violent and unstable, how they had feared humanity's rapid advancement, and how they had orchestrated their exile based on carefully constructed lies. The holographic displays around him shimmered to life, showing the Council station in perfect detail. Their defenses were pathetic by human standards. Energy shields that couldn't stop a ship capable of phasing through physical matter, weapons that would dissipate harmlessly against their quantum-stabilized hulls. "Sir, we're detecting Council ships moving to intercept," reported Lisa Gray from her tactical station. "Their weapons are powered but not locked." Porter almost pitied them. "Let them come. Maintain our course and speed. No defensive measures needed." The crew understood. They had trained for this moment for years. Humanity's return needed to send a message, but not through violence. They would show the Council just how far they had evolved beyond such primitive displays of force. The Council vessels approached, their engines pushing them to what they considered maximum speed. To the humans, they appeared to be moving in slow motion. 800 millennia of technological development had created a gap that could never be bridged. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, sir," Wells reported. "Standard warning protocols." "Put it through," Porter said, knowing exactly what would come next. The voice that filled the bridge was tense. "Official. Unidentified vessels. You are entering restricted Galactic Council space. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection, or we will be forced to open fire." Porter took a deep breath. This was the moment that would begin everything. "Return broadcast, tight beam, all frequencies they can detect." He squared his shoulders and spoke clearly. "Galactic Council Station, this is Commander James Porter of the Earth Fleet ship Vengeance. We are the children of those you exiled. We are humanity, and we have returned." The silence that followed was deafening. Porter could almost imagine the panic spreading through the Council station. Their worst nightmare had just become reality. The species they had cast aside as savages had returned with power beyond their comprehension. "Sir," Wells said quietly, "they're scrambling their entire defense fleet." Porter watched as hundreds of small dots emerged from the station's docking bays, desperately moving to form a defensive screen. It was like watching children with toy boats trying to stop a tsunami. "Hold position," he ordered. "Let them come to us. Let them see exactly what they're dealing with." He turned to face his crew, each member a testament to humanity's resilience and evolution. "It's time to show the Council exactly what humanity has become in their absence." The next few moments would change the galaxy forever. Humanity hadn't come back for simple revenge. They had returned to restore balance to a corrupt system. The Council was about to learn that their greatest mistake hadn't been exiling humanity. It had been giving them 800,000 years to perfect themselves in isolation. Porter smiled again as the Council ships approached. The real show was about to begin. Council President Marcus Reed's hands shook as he watched the massive human ships through the station's observation deck. His ancestors had been among the few humans who chose to stay with the Council during the Great Exile, betraying their own kind for power and position. Now, 800 millennia later, that decision had come back to haunt their descendant. "Sir, they're not responding to our warning shots," reported Defense Minister Taylor, his green scales reflecting the emergency lights that flashed throughout the station. "Our weapons, they're just passing through their ships like they're not even there." Reed pressed his palm against the cold glass of the viewing window. The human vessels were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Sleek, dark shapes that seemed to bend the very light around them. His enhanced eyes, a product of centuries of careful breeding with various council races, could barely track their movements. "How many ships?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. 30 confirmed vessels, sir, but their energy signatures, they're off the charts. One of their ships has more power than our entire defense fleet combined." The main communication screen flared to life without warning. The Council's best security systems hadn't even detected the intrusion. A man appeared on the screen, human, but somehow different from the Council humans Reed knew. There was an air of absolute confidence about him that made Reed's spine tingle. "Council President Reed." Commander Porter's voice filled the chamber. "Your ancestors chose to stay behind when humanity was exiled. They chose power over loyalty. Tell me, how has that choice worked out for their descendants?" Reed straightened his back, forcing himself to meet Porter's gaze. "Commander, if you're here for revenge." "Revenge?" Porter's laugh was surprisingly warm. "If we wanted revenge, your station would already be atoms scattered across space. No, Mr. President, we're here for something far more important: justice." The defense minister's console suddenly lit up with warnings. "Sir, we're detecting quantum transmission signals throughout the station. They're downloading our entire database." Reed watched helplessly as centuries of carefully guarded council secrets were stripped away in seconds. The humans weren't just powerful, they were operating on a level of technology that made the council look like children playing with toys. "Your security is impressive," Porter said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "For technology that's 800,000 years old. Did you know your encryption systems still use the same basic principles they used when they exiled us? We broke them within minutes of arriving." A new figure stepped into view beside Porter. A woman with silver-white hair and eyes that seemed to shift colors as she moved. "President Reed," she said, "I am Ambassador Anna Stone. We request an immediate full session of the Galactic Council." "The Council doesn't respond to demands from," Taylor began, but Reed held up his hand to silence him. "You're not making a request, are you?" Reed asked, finally understanding. "You already have enough information to destroy the Council's authority completely." "Smart man," Porter smiled. "Must be that human DNA still lingering in your genome. You have 1 hour to assemble the Council. We'll be transmitting proof of the true reason for humanity's exile to every inhabited world in the galaxy at the same time." The screen went dark, leaving Reed staring at his own reflection. In it, he saw 800,000 years of lies beginning to unravel. The Council had built its power on the foundation of humanity's exile, an exile engineered by races who had feared human potential. "Send the emergency summons to all Council members," Reed ordered, his voice barely a whisper, "and may whatever gods they believe in help them all when the truth comes out." Outside the window, the human ships hung motionless in space, their very presence a testament to what humanity had become in their exile. The Council had meant to contain humanity's growth, to prevent them from becoming too powerful. Instead, they had created exactly what they had feared most, a human race that had evolved far beyond their control. The next hour would change the galaxy forever, and Marcus Reed, descendant of humanity's betrayers, would have a front-row seat to watch it all unfold. The Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity for the first time in over 10,000 years. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy sat in tense silence as Ambassador Anna Stone stood at the center of the vast circular room. Behind her, Commander Porter watched with carefully hidden satisfaction as the truth about humanity's exile was about to shatter their carefully constructed lies. Honorable members of the Council, Stone's voice carried easily through the chamber, her enhanced vocal cords making each word crystal clear. For 800 millennia, you have told the galaxy that humans were exiled because we were dangerous, unstable, and violent. She paused, her color-shifting eyes scanning the room. Today, you will learn who the truly dangerous ones were. With a subtle gesture of her hand, she activated the quantum projectors that the human ships had secretly installed throughout the chamber. The air above them filled with ancient recordings, documents, and communication logs that the Council thought had been destroyed ages ago. "Watch," she commanded, "as your ancestors planned our destruction." The first recording showed a secret meeting from 800,000 years ago. The leaders of the three most powerful Council races at the time, beings whose species now held minor positions in the galaxy, were plotting. Their words filled the chamber. "The humans advance too quickly. In 1,000 years, they'll surpass us all. We must act now, while we still can. Plant evidence of their violence. Create incidents. Make the galaxy fear them." President Reed watched from his elevated position as the color drained from the faces of the current representatives of those ancient races. Their ancestors' voices continued to damn them with every word. More evidence appeared. Fabricated reports of human aggression, staged attacks blamed on Earth, carefully edited recordings that made humans appear unstable and dangerous. The Council chamber erupted in shouts and accusations as centuries of carefully maintained power structures began to crumble. "Silence." Stone's voice cut through the chaos. "We're not finished. Watch what your ancestors did to other races who showed too much promise." New recordings played, showing how the Council's dominant species had systematically suppressed and sabotaged dozens of emerging civilizations over the millennia. Some were still represented in the chamber, their delegates now standing in shock as they learned the true reason their species had never achieved their full potential. "This is outrageous," shouted one of the Council elders, his ceremonial robes quivering with rage. "These records could be fabricated." Commander Porter stepped forward, his movement deliberately slow and controlled. "Every record is encoded with quantum signatures that cannot be faked. Your own science divisions can verify this, though I suspect many of them already knew parts of the truth." Stone raised her hand again, and the projections changed to show current data, the results of Council research that had been hidden from most of the galaxy. "You haven't stopped your manipulations. Even now, you actively work to keep lesser species from advancing too quickly." The chamber erupted again, but this time it wasn't just chaos. It was the sound of power structures shattering. Several delegates were already calling their homeworlds, ignoring all Council protocols in their panic. President Reed stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. "And what do the humans want now? Revenge. Our destruction." Stone smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. "If we wanted destruction, we wouldn't be talking. No, we want something far more interesting." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of the representatives from suppressed species. "We want reform. Total, complete, galactic reform." The humans had planned this moment perfectly. As Stone spoke, similar revelations were being broadcast across every inhabited world in Council space. The old power structure wasn't just being challenged, it was being torn down completely, exposed for the corrupt facade it had always been. In the observation gallery, Commander Porter allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. Phase 3 was complete. Now came the interesting part, showing the galaxy what true cooperation could achieve. The Council chamber had grown deadly quiet as Ambassador Stone activated a new holographic display. Above the gathered representatives, a massive three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, with thousands of points of light marking inhabited worlds. More than half of them were flashing red. These red markers, Stone explained, her voice cutting through the silence, show every world your council has deliberately held back, every civilization you've stunted, every species you've prevented from reaching their true potential. Commander Porter stepped forward, his dark uniform a stark contrast to Stone's silver-white attire. "We're not here to destroy the council," he announced. "We're here to rebuild it. Properly this time." A large delegate from one of the council's founding races stood up, his massive frame trembling with barely controlled rage. "You dare to come here and demand." His voice cut off as his personal shield suddenly failed. Throughout the chamber, other defensive systems flickered and died. The humans hadn't just broken through the station's outer defenses, they had complete control of every system. "We don't demand," Porter said calmly. "We offer a choice. The old way ends today, one way or another. You get to decide how." Ambassador Stone raised her hand, and new images appeared, detailed plans for a completely restructured galactic government. Option 1. Work with us to create a true galactic alliance. All species equal. All technology shared. All resources distributed fairly. The chamber erupted in protests, but Stone continued as if she couldn't hear them. "Every species will have representation based on merit, not historical power. Every world will have access to advanced technology, not just the ones you deem worthy." "And if we refuse?" asked President Reed, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Porter smiled. "Then we move to option 2. He gestured, and the galactic map changed. Now it showed human ships positioned throughout Council space, ships that had been invisible until this moment. "We disable your faster-than-light technology. We share our advances with every world you've suppressed. We let natural evolution take its course." "You would destroy centuries of stable government," shouted one of the council elders. "Stable for whom?" Stone countered. She pointed to a group of representatives from newer council races. "Ask them if the system feels stable. Ask the worlds you've kept at pre-space flight level if they feel the galaxy is well governed." Porter walked to the center of the chamber, his steps echoing in the tense silence. "You have 6 hours to decide. Choose wisely." He looked directly at President Reed. "Your ancestors chose power over their own species once before. Consider how well that worked out." The chamber exploded into chaos as Porter and Stone simply vanished, their quantum technology making such exits possible. The council members rushed to contact their homeworlds, but found their secure channels already filled with transmissions from angry populations who had seen the evidence of centuries of manipulation. In the observation room above the chamber, Porter and Stone reappeared, watching the chaos unfold below. "They'll try to fight back," Stone said, though she didn't sound concerned. Porter nodded. "Of course they will. That's why we've spent the last century preparing every suppressed world for this moment. The Council's power structure was already rotting from within. We just provided the final push." On his quantum display, reports were already coming in from across Council space. Minor worlds, armed with suddenly functional advanced technology, were demanding immediate representation. Council military forces were finding their weapon systems mysteriously offline. The carefully maintained balance of power was dissolving. 6 hours, Stone mused, watching a group of council leaders argue below. "Do you think they'll make the right choice?" Porter smiled. "They don't really have a choice. The galaxy is changing whether they like it or not. The only question is whether they want to be part of the new system or relics of the old one." Through the window behind them, Earth's restored fleet hung in space, a silent reminder of humanity's return and the power they now wielded. The next 6 hours would determine the future of every species in the galaxy. 3 hours into the Council's 6-hour deadline, the first reports of rebellion reached the station. On the main viewing screen of the Emergency Command Center, President Reed watched as centuries of control crumbled before his eyes. "Sir, we've lost contact with the mining colonies in Sector 7, a young officer reported, his hands shaking as he read the updates. "They're They're declaring independence from Council authority. Reed wasn't surprised. Those colonies had been exploited for generations, their workers kept in near-slavery conditions, while Council worlds grew rich from their resources. Now, with human technology suddenly available to them, they had the power to fight back. Commander Porter appeared on one of the screens, his expression neutral. "Having trouble keeping control, Mr. President." "You knew this would happen," Reed said. "It wasn't a question. You didn't just come back with advanced technology. You've been preparing for this for years. Centuries. Actually," Porter corrected him, "while your council was busy maintaining its power, we were making friends. Lots of friends." New reports flooded the command center. Planet after planet was rising up against Council authority. The suppressed worlds, armed with previously locked human technology, were demanding immediate recognition and representation. In the Council chamber below, the scene was chaos. Representatives from the dominant worlds were shouting threats, while delegates from lesser species were openly celebrating. Several Council members had already fled the station, only to find their ships couldn't enter faster than light travel. "Sir," another officer called out, "the defense fleet, they're standing down. The crew are refusing to follow orders to suppress the rebellions." Reed watched as the mighty Council defense forces, the tool that had kept order for so long, simply stopped working. It wasn't just the human technology affecting their ships. The crews themselves were choosing not to fight. Ambassador Stone appeared beside Porter on the screen. "We gave every suppressed world access to the truth about their history, about how the Council kept them down, about the technology and opportunities they were denied. What did you expect them to do with that information?" "The galaxy will collapse into chaos," Reed argued, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Porter said firmly. "It's already reordering itself. Look." The main screen shifted to show a new map. Hundreds of worlds were forming new alliances, creating trade agreements, sharing resources and technology. The Council's careful system of keeping worlds isolated and dependent was falling apart, replaced by genuine cooperation. Reed looked at his own hands. Hands that contained DNA from a dozen species, the result of centuries of careful breeding among Council elites. He had always been proud of his mixed heritage, seeing it as a sign of his family's high status. Now he realized it was just another sign of how far the Council had fallen from its original purpose. "The Council was supposed to unite the galaxy," he said quietly. "Somewhere along the way, we became what we were created to prevent. There's still time to fix it," Stone offered. "You know what needs to be done." Reed straightened his back and made the decision his ancestors should have made 800,000 years ago. He opened a channel to all Council worlds. "This is President Reed. I am hereby dissolving the current Council structure. All worlds are released from their obligations to the Council. A new constitutional convention will begin immediately to create a truly representative galactic government." As he spoke, more reports of rebellion and revolution poured in, but they weren't violent uprisings. They were celebrations. Worlds that had been kept down for millennia were finally free to reach their potential. In orbit around the station, the human fleet remained unchanged, silent guardians ensuring that the old order couldn't try to maintain its power through force. But they weren't needed. The Council's control had been built on lies and fear, and once those were stripped away, it couldn't survive. The galaxy was transforming itself, and this time, humanity was helping to build something new rather than being cast out of it. 1 month after the Council's collapse, Commander Porter stood on the observation deck of Earth's newly constructed space station. Below him, representatives from over 1,000 worlds gathered for the first meeting of the Galactic Alliance. It was a sight that would have been impossible just weeks ago. Quite a change from the old Council chamber, isn't it? Ambassador Stone walked up beside him, her silver-white hair reflecting the light of nearby stars. No more raised platforms for the superior races. No more back rows for the lesser species. Porter nodded, watching as delegates from formerly suppressed worlds mixed freely with representatives from the old Council powers. "Have you seen the latest technology sharing reports?" Stone smiled. 300 formerly restricted worlds have achieved spaceflight in the past month. Another 500 have cured diseases that the Council deliberately kept them from solving. She paused, checking her quantum display. And the mining colonies in Sector 7 have already developed their own clean energy system. Amazing what people can do when they're not being held back, Porter said, his eyes fixed on a group of delegates from one of the youngest spacefaring races. They were excitedly showing their latest innovations to representatives from more established worlds. The main doors opened, and President Reed entered. He looked different now. He had removed the elaborate robes of council leadership, choosing instead to wear simple diplomatic attire. "Commander, Ambassador," he greeted them. "The first session is about to begin." As they walked toward the chamber, Porter's quantum implants fed him constant updates. Across the galaxy, worlds that had been enemies under council rule were now working together. Species that had been kept apart for millennia were sharing knowledge, resources, and technology. "Any word from the holdouts?" Stone asked Reed, referring to the few former council powers that had refused to join the new alliance. Reed shook his head, still sulking in their territories. Though without access to faster-than-light travel, they're finding it hard to maintain their influence. The new alliance chamber was a marvel of human engineering. Instead of the hierarchical arrangement of the old council, it was designed in concentric circles, with every seat at the same level. Quantum translation systems allowed all species to communicate perfectly, eliminating the language barriers the council had often used to maintain control. "Commander," a voice called out. A delegate from one of the former mining colonies approached them. His people had been treated as little more than slaves under council rule. Now he stood tall, wearing the clean uniform of his world's new government. "We've finished implementing the education systems you shared with us. Our children are already learning things we never dreamed possible." Porter smiled warmly. "That's exactly what we hoped to hear. Your people have a lot of catching up to do, and a lot to teach the rest of us." As they took their seats, Stone activated the chamber's main display. Above them, a real-time map showed the incredible changes sweeping across the galaxy. Green lights represented worlds that had joined the alliance, blue ones showed neutral territories, and a few red dots marked the holdout council worlds. "Look at that," Reed said softly. "More green lights every day. The galaxy is healing itself." Porter watched as the session began. Representatives from former council worlds sat next to delegates from planets that had been considered primitive just months ago. They were all equals now, all working together to build something new. "You know," Stone whispered to Porter, "when we planned our return, some worried that we'd become just like the council, drunk on power, eager for revenge. But this is better than revenge." Porter nodded, watching as a former mining colony presented their new clean energy system to enthusiastic applause. "We didn't come back to rule the galaxy. We came back to free it." The future they had spent centuries planning was finally taking shape, and it was more beautiful than even they had imagined. 1 year after humanity's return, Earth was ready to host its first Galactic Alliance summit. Commander Porter stood at the window of his office in the new Alliance headquarters, watching ships from 1,000 worlds fill the skies above the restored planet. "Beautiful, isn't it?" President Reed asked, joining him at the window. "I never thought I'd see Earth with my own eyes. The Council kept it off limits for so long, calling it a monument to instability." Porter smiled. "Now it's the heart of the most stable government the galaxy has ever known." He gestured to the bustling city below, where beings from every corner of the galaxy walked together freely. Hard to believe this was all empty wilderness a year ago. Earth had been transformed. The humans had spent centuries preparing their homeworld, but they hadn't just rebuilt it for themselves. The new Earth was designed to be a home for all species, with environments suited to every form of life in the galaxy. Ambassador Stone entered the office, her quantum display showing the latest updates. "The last holdout worlds have requested membership in the Alliance," she announced. Even they couldn't ignore the progress everyone else was making. "How are the technology sharing programs going?" Reed asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. "Better than we hoped," Stone replied. "The former mining colonies are now leading experts in quantum engineering. 3 previously pre-space flight worlds have developed their own dimensional slip drives. And that's just this month's report." Porter's quantum implants pinged with a notification. It was time for the ceremony. The 3 of them walked together to the Grand Hall, where representatives from every Alliance world waited. The atmosphere was different from the old council. There was laughter, friendly conversation, genuine cooperation. "Ready for your speech?" Stone asked Porter as they approached the podium. He nodded, looking out at the gathered delegates. 800,000 years ago, the council had called humans dangerous and unstable. Now, humans were helping to guide the galaxy into a new age of peace and progress. "Members of the Galactic Alliance," Porter began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "1 year ago, humanity returned to the galactic stage. We didn't come seeking revenge for our exile. We came seeking change." The crowd fell silent, listening intently. "Look around you," Porter continued. "See who sits beside you. Under the old council, many of you would never have been allowed in the same room. Some of you wouldn't even have been allowed off your own worlds." He gestured to the massive windows, where Earth's restored beauty was on full display. "This is what cooperation looks like. This is what happens when we lift each other up instead of holding each other down." President Reed stepped forward next. "As someone whose ancestors chose the wrong side of history, I can say this. The galaxy is finally what it always should have been, a place where every species can reach their full potential." Ambassador Stone took her turn at the podium. "The old council feared humanity's rapid advancement. They were right to be afraid, not because we were dangerous, but because we would show everyone the truth. When species work together, there is no limit to what we can achieve." As if to emphasize her point, the sky above Earth lit up with a spectacular display. Ships from every Alliance world performed an intricate dance, their quantum drives painting patterns of light across the atmosphere. It was a celebration of unity, of progress, of potential fulfilled. Porter looked at Reed and Stone, then back at the gathered delegates. The old council had tried to stop humanity's progress out of fear. Instead, they had given humanity 800,000 years to perfect themselves, to learn, to grow, and to come back not as conquerors, but as liberators. The galaxy had changed forever, and this time, it had changed for the better.